Yes, you heard right, this is 50 lands in a dream, and if you like gambling, this is the deck for you. Wait, gambling? Yes. This deck will show you the highest of highs, drawing you 30 cards in a turn, and tripling your mana every attack and growing huge creatures, or going infinitely wide, not to mention one-shotting your opponents as soon as you attack with your commander, all while reanimating huge bombs turn after turn. Or sometimes you'll accidentally sacrifice all your lands and not get them back and be really sad about it. So strap in, it's time to gamble with Sin, Spira's Punishment. Somebody's getting punished, let's just hope it's not us. So, Sin is a 7-mana 7/7 flyer that reads, whenever Sin enters or attacks, exile a permanent card from your graveyard at random. Then create a tapped token that's a copy of that card, and if the exiled card is a land card, repeat the process. So, how do we break this? Well, since Sin only targets permanent cards, we can play as many instants and sorcery cards as we want, and not worry about Sin targeting them in the graveyard. This will make up a big chunk of our deck, as it will be dedicated to various ramp spells as well as interaction. Now, the only permanent cards in our deck we want to be hitting are huge bombs, and of course lands. But why so many lands? Well, there's two major reasons we need to do this. Reason number one, have you ever wondered what the fastest way to ramp is? Ramp is really important, especially if you're playing a 7-mana commander like we are, but what if I told you we can get our 7-mana commander out on turn 3? On turn 2, play one of the deck's various 2-mana ramp spells. Then, on turn 3, after playing our 4th land, we're going to cast Rain of Filth, tapping and floating all of our mana before then sacrificing all of our lands for black. Then, with our 7 mana, we can cast Sin, and when Sin enters the battlefield, we can reanimate all of our lands back as token copies. Okay, so realistically, it's probably more going to be like turn 4 or 5 that we get Sin out if we don't draw Rain of Filth, but in addition to Rain of Filth, cards like Summer Bloom can also enable us to get them out as early as turn 3. By allowing us to drop 3 lands from our hand into play, we can accelerate ourselves like crazy, and unlike most decks, we'll actually have the lands in play to get the full value out of a Summer Bloom. And of course, this deck is probably the happiest deck Burgeoning has ever been in. Generally speaking, cards that let you play additional lands each turn are cheaper and more valuable than traditional ramp spells, as they don't have to go search your library for the lands, and therefore they can have a little bit more value slapped on the card. Additionally, we want to never miss our land drops, because remember, it's not ramp if you're missing land drops. Okay, reason number 2, and this is the more fun reason, is because with Sin's trigger, we actively want to increase the likelihood that his random trigger hits lands, because whenever we hit a land, we get to spin the wheel and go again. So essentially, every time we miss our big bomb reanimation target, we get to ramp for free. And because the deck is primarily playing huge bombs, we don't really ever miss much. So when we do get Sin in play, we're hoping it's going to reanimate as many lands as possible before it picks our bomb, especially with all of our landfall cards generating huge value along the way. But what about if the gamble doesn't pay off? Well, if we sacrifice all of our lands to an effect like Rain of Filth, Pitiless Carnage, or Reprocess, then cast Sin, and you hit a non-land permanent with this trigger in our graveyard instead of hitting all of our lands first, you'll be set really far back, have no lands in play, and assuming that Sin lives to your next turn, you might get the opportunity to get them all back, but if Sin dies, you've gone all the way back to turn 1 while all of your opponents are pushing towards the win. Having a big threat in play is great and all, but not so much if you have 0 lands. So, in order to avoid this from happening, we'll need ways to curate our graveyard so that when we do look to reanimate all of our lands, we can get rid of the bombs we don't want to hit. Or, if we're hoping to get a specific bomb, we can remove the other ones to curate the randomness of Sin's trigger. So, cards with Delve or Collect Evidence can help us out along the way, as well as other cool effects that either pull cards out of our yard or exile them. Now, there are a few non-land permanent cards in the deck that we're really hoping we don't hit off Sin's trigger, but are crucial for setting us up in the early game, like Hedron Crab and Icetill Explorer, which will help keep our graveyard really filled with hopefully lots of lands, as well as juicy reanimation targets so when Sin does come into play, we'll be able to bring them back. Oh yeah, did I mention this deck is a Toolbox deck? With cards like Entomb and other Entomb variants that we have in the deck, we can curate the kind of bombs that we're going to reanimate. Our opponent's board's getting too scary? Let's have all of our opponents sacrifice 3 creatures and start reanimating them every upkeep. Or maybe there's too many creatures to deal with and sacrificing 3 creatures isn't enough. How about we bounce everyone's creatures with Summon Leviathan? And when it enters, bounces all non-sea monsters, but because Sin, our commander, is Leviathan, it works perfectly with him. Then, on the following chapters, is going to draw some cards. It also works great with AC and Famished Worldsire, as they're both sea monsters as well, with AC drawing us a ton of cards off all of Sin's landfall triggers, and giving us extra land drop every turn, which unsurprisingly will have the lands in our hand to play. And Famished Worldsire is amazing in this deck, essentially scape-shifting all of our lands away, fetching us new ones, filling our graveyard with lands, so next turn when Sin attacks, we can reanimate them all back. Also, because for each land Famished Worldsire devours, we look 3 cards deep, we'll also be ramping us. Because 50% of our deck is lands, for every 1 land devoured by Famished Worldsire, we're gonna get an average of 1.5 lands back. If we need an even stronger board wipe though, for example, Ugin with a -6 exiles all colored permanents with mana value 6 or less, crucially letting us keep our 7 mana commander and all of our lands with a 1 loyalty planeswalker still in play to start lightning bolting people next turn. But it gets even more ridiculous. Now, my absolute favorite card of this list lets us one-shot our opponents as soon as we untap with Sin. But if you're enjoying this video, please do consider subscribing and turning the bell notification on, as I'd love to have you come back for the next video. It really means the world to me to have your guys' support, so thank you so much. Now, my favorite card for the turn we untap with Sin, which is probably turn 5 or 6 depending on how good of a start we have, is Colossification. By throwing Colossification in the bin, we can immediately take out a player with 27 commander damage when we attack. Colossification reads, enchanted creature gets +20/+20, and when it enters, tap the enchanted creature. But because Sin is already tapped and attacking when Colossification enters, it has no negative effect, doming our opponents for 27 in the air, likely taking them out of the game. And if Sin's reanimation combos aren't working for you, or the randomness is just not in your favor, with all the mana that we're generating from Sin, from reanimating all of our token lands and casting all of our ramp spells, we can just win with X spells like Finale of Devastation, Profane Command, or Torment of Hailfire. Okay, so how do we play this deck well and not dirtle out top decking lands, or accidentally losing all of our lands in the process, while making sure we get big value every time we attack? We want to keep hands with a lot of lands and a couple ramp spells. With 50 lands and 17 ramp spells, we should be able to do this with minimal mulligans. Then, on our early turns, we want to prioritize playing our fetch lands and our sack lands so we can fill the graveyard with as many lands as possible. With our different fetch cards and our ramp cards, we want to be looking for our surveil lands to fill the graveyard even more. In the early turns, we're also hoping to ideally resolve a cool landfall payoff card before Sin comes out, like Mossborn Hydra, Retreat to Hagra, or Scoot Swarm. That way when Sin comes out, we'll immediately start exploding with landfall value. Now, this is a Field of the Dead deck and it is running crop rotation, so obviously if we're able to, we want to get Field of the Dead in play as soon as possible. In addition to Field of the Dead, crop rotation can also go grab a variety of different value lands in the deck, as well as different man lands so we can sink our mana into creating some creature lands. In these early turns, it's crucial to be mindful about what kind of permanent cards we're putting in our graveyard and avoid putting in any setup cards. If, however, we accidentally do mill one of our setup cards, we'll be looking to get rid of it from our bin with cards like Analyze the Pollen, collecting evidence, Cling to Dust, or Dig Through Time, delving them away. If we're unable to find an early game landfall payoff, and we're having a more fair game for our opponents, the goal will be to get huge bombs into the bin with our various mill or entomb effects, with entomb and similar cards acting as toolbox cards to curate the kind of cards we're reanimating with Sin's Trigger, being able to grab the specific thing we want based on the situation. And like I said before, if you aren't having the most explosive turns with Sin's reanimation, or you're just getting unlucky a lot, you still have an extremely reliable backup plan of just sinking all your mana into big X spells or just hard casting all your bombs. Special shout out goes to Hermit Druid for milling us for a ton of cards whenever we activate him, because we are intentionally running very few basic lands. Be careful, however, when you're playing so you don't actually mill yourself when you activate Hermit Druid, and keep an eye on how many basics are left in your library. Once we have a lot of lands in play, Abundance will ensure we don't draw dead anymore, and Singularity Rupture and Toxic Deluge will help keep the board clear and buy us some time before Sin comes out, while filling the bin with a ton of cards. So that's Sin Spira's punishment. Somebody's getting punished, let's just hope that it's not us. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please do consider leaving a like on this video, or joining our Discord. We have cool conversations all the time going on in there about custom cards, different deck building ideas, and you guys give me a lot of inspiration to make these videos. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next one.